What's going on, YouTube? Got another build guide for you here today. We're approaching the 3.23 Affliction League, and I feel like this is going to be a great league starter. Super tanky, insane amounts of damage, good movement speed. I love this build. It was a blast. It's got good clear, etc., etc. I personally, this is one of the more well-rounded league starters I've ever started with, and hopefully this will benefit some of you guys. When you're trying to decide on what to league start for Affliction. So we're just going to get right into it. The front clips on the front end you would have saw, it deletes, Eater and Searing and Uber Elder and all that kind of stuff. It beat Uber Elder, it beat Uber Searing. Hey. See this big Watcher's Eye, dude. Vulnerability, bleed. Wow, that might be the worst Watcher's Eye I've ever seen. Uber Exarch, it beat everything, right? So Maven is the one that it has a little bit of issues with, just simply because of the debuff that doesn't allow you to regenerate health. We rely on a lot of health regeneration, so Maven is a little bit annoying. But so long as you know the mechanics and you can avoid the spinning beams and all that kind of stuff, the fight is pretty trivial and fairly easy. But that is the one that is kind of a pain with this one, just simply because of the lack of regen debuff that you can get hit with in that fight. But otherwise, mapping is fantastic. Bossing is really easy, and you take very few deaths and things like that. So it is this build is fantastic, and I think you guys will really like it if you decide to go with it. So let's just get right into the tree, and you know what? We'll actually use Path of Building for this. So it's fairly standard what you might use for like an elementalist or something like that totem. I path around this side. I think elementalist kind of cruises through all of this. It felt better, which I did play with that. I did try a variation where we pass through all this and we take some of this totem stuff here and some of the skill effect duration, all that kind of stuff. But at this version right here, this felt the best. It allowed me to kind of maximize my points. And the POB will be in the description, so if you don't want to hear about why I'm doing all these things or whatever the case may be, by all means, you can just go hit the POB and take a look for yourself. But as you can see, we've got 26 million Ignite DPS, so that's, absolutely insane. Life is, 3,800 here, but we've got 636 life regen per second. We've got 37% chance to evade. We have a 72% physical damage reduction and 100% chance to suppress spell damage. So the survivability is really, really good on this, and it's an absolute blast. So we'll get right into the tree, and as you can see, we have some tattoos in here, which, may or may not be available. From my understanding, they will not be available, so you may need to find like a little bit. The most important ones here are the spell suppression and the chaos resistance. So those you might just have to spec a line or two into other gear elsewhere. So it will be unfortunate to lose the tattoos, but it won't be the end of the world because we don't take anything super crazy out of that. The one that we might end up missing a little bit is, do I still have it? This right here. Obviously, we lose +1 to all deck skill gems, but with that being said, our if we take a look at our explosive arrow, it's a level 32. So, and there is a fall off. Surgog has a great video on it, how there's a little bit of fall off once you hit gem level 30 and above. It grows exponentially, but once you hit level 30, it kind of, the angle of increased damage starts to kind of taper off a little bit. So you'd be okay with losing 2. 32 is a little bit overkill. You should try to shoot for 30. That's kind of the most optimum, and then spec into other things as you see fit. But Yeah, so and let me just say right now, everybody always freaks out when they see mageblood here. Obviously, this is an end game item. You're going to be using dyidian Dawn for the entirety of the build, essentially. This, in a lot of cases, is best in slot. Mageblood doesn't feel better until your build is absolutely ridiculous, where at that point it kind of doesn't matter. You just gain some quality of life things like movement speed, and you can move resistances to your flasks and things like that. But for the entirety of the game, I beat everything, all the Ubers, everything with the dyidian Dawn and just these kind of standard flasks, just a quicksilver, a sulfur, a granite, and quartz. Quartz you can get rid of if you're able to get your spell suppress up to 100% without it, but up until fairly late into the game, I needed to use this flask. If you have spell suppress elsewhere and you don't need it, you can swap this out with something else, perhaps even ruby flask, and I'll get into why ruby flask is so good for this a little bit down the road. So again, let's kind of get back into the tree here. What you're going to do is I spec down into all of this first, and then later we go up to the top of the tree. So we'll start here. We're going to come down, and in all honesty, I come through these first. So we come through these life and armor nodes, and then later we spec into, we save a couple points right here once we, have survivability and stuff elsewhere. So you'll start with these points here. Then we're going to come down. Prismatic skin, you can wait a little while for. You don't have to take this right off the bat. I would kind of come across through this and go ahead and get your, if you're able to use elemental equilibrium, and I'll explain how all that works once we get into it. And then we come down into this, we grab our totem stuff, we get some life, and then we come up here, grab this totem stuff, life, accuracy, and then, some big spell suppression that we get out of this. Early on, you may want to take these 2 points here just for a little added spell suppression, and then as you get more on your gear, you can spec these out. As far as our, there's a couple extra points. I'm a level 98, but obviously if I was a 100, we would take these 2. So here we use the large cluster this is just a 10 passive, you could use a 12 or whatever, but we have attributes, attack speed, damage, and increase effect. So that adds an insane amount of damage here. All those 12% damage with bows and then damage over time with bows all turn to 16%. The damage turns to 5%, attack speed to 3, attributes to 4. So this is an insane cluster jewel. And as I'm sure if you played any other bow builds, these 12 passive small passives are just absolutely insane and super powerful, and you get so much damage out of it. And then as far as we just use the one medium, and this is just increased attack and cast speed if you summoned a totem recently, and then you have onslaught if you've summoned a totem recently. So this is really, Sleepless Sentries is really the important one here, just for that free onslaught every time you throw one down. So this is absolutely insane. You definitely want to use Sleepless Sentries. The rest of these, there might be something else that you prefer here instead. Like you may, in this particular case, I use that because I use Ignite Prolif, but you could use Ignite Prolif on your small cluster jewel and then use something else in place of that, right? And then again, down here, we just take all the totem stuff, a little bit of life. One of the most important nodes here, as you can see, we take all these Ignite stuff here. These are the new nodes they added in 3.22. But the main thing, one of our big masteries here is Fire Mastery, and regenerate 1 life per second for each 1% of uncapped fire resistance, okay? And that is where this flask here, the Ruby flask, comes into play, right? You take less fire damage, but you also get plus 50 to fire resistance, okay? And every uncapped... So uncapped, if you're unaware, means everything over 82%, because we obviously have 82% max res on these. So 83% and above grants 1% increased life regeneration per second, right? So we have right here, you subtract that. So we have 199 life regeneration per second just from all this overcapped, right? And this plays into our ascendancy, right? So we have, in our ascendancy, We're going to take, and I'm kind of bopping around here just because I want to try to explain things and why I'm making some of these decisions as we go. For those of you that, know POB or know what I'm doing here, you can just skip right to the next gear section or whatever the case is. But with this, with Velocco's Storm Embrace, modifiers to fire resistance, maximum fire resistance also apply to cold. So we don't need to stack any cold or lightning resist, maximum cold or lightning resist, because we stack fire res, right? Like you get an additional fire res here. You get, once you take this, you get +2 here, so that goes to fire, and then you get the additional fire here, right? So just out of those these 3 points that we take, we're getting, an additional +4 max fire res that then also applies to cold and lightning. So that's absolutely massive, right? We might as well just finish with the ascendancy here real quick. So again, we stack fire resistance across all gear. We don't have to put much cold and lightning resistance on anything, because half of our fire resistance applies to cold and lightning. So this really, it is very, very powerful and helps us free up lines on other gear to do chaos resistance or movement speed or spell suppression or whatever, the armor, whatever the case may be that you're looking for. These nodes are very, very helpful on freeing up lines on our gear for other things. Hinakora's Death's Fury. So this node, a lot of people complained about prior to the release of 3.2.2. I personally think it's absolutely awesome for clear speed. For a 5% chance to explode, dealing 500%. That's an insane amount of damage, and 5%. So if you're like 5%, that's not much. But if you have a pack of 20 monsters, based on 5%, one of those is going to explode for 500%. And so when you're end game and you have these huge packs of monsters, that'll proc multiple times and just is immensely helpful with clear speed, and is a lot more powerful than I think it looks like on the surface. It procs a lot, and it's very, very good. And then lastly, we just get a little bit more survivability, recoup 25% of damage taken by your totems as life, so that helps us with our regen, and that stacks on top of all the regen that we have elsewhere. And that kind of plays into what I was saying earlier with why we have a little bit of issues with Maven, just because so much of our regen and whatnot is reliant on regenerating health, and when Maven puts a stop to that, it does become a little bit of a pain in the ass. But again, if you know the mechanics and you know how to fight Maven, it is still fairly trivial, and you just play like you normally would, right? There are a lot of builds that are affected by her that debuff, so that is what it is. Getting back to the tree again, you will come up this way after you've done all this down here. And again, this is mainly just pathing to get us to Ancestral Bond, Primal Manifestation, Sovereignty. This is a very, very powerful node and totally worth speccing up. And then we get up here and we get Elemental Overload. This we take because the tattoo, you won't take this unless there's some way to gain tattoos. And then we just have a little bit of damage over time multiplier up here. So that feels pretty good. As far as jewels, this is where it starts getting a little bit more expensive. These are where, outside of mageblood, this is where a lot of expense comes from. And I didn't do these until the very, very end, right? Like these were all kind of the final things. Like I said, I had already beaten everything in the game. This was me just kind of min-maxing the build a little bit. So we have an Unnatural Instinct. Obviously, that's very, very powerful with this right here, with all the attack speed, the phasing, damage over time, bow skills, etc. And then down here, you get attack damage least and increased damage with ailments from attack skills, attack damage, all that kind of stuff. So, these feel pretty good. Unnatural Instinct is nice, but not necessary. You can just slot in, a normal jewel. Then we also use Forbidden Flame and Forbidden Flesh, and this gives us Aspect of Carnage. And our other one is somewhere around down here somewhere. So here's the other one. And what that gives us is 10% increased damage taken, but you get 40% more damage. So this adds an insane amount of damage, but hurts survivability a little bit. Again, once your build is strong enough, if you can afford these, they are expensive. I think I spent probably 50 divines or so for the both of them. One of them is fairly cheap. One of them is like 40 divines. So, and that could change if nobody, is running, any of this next league for 323 seems doubtful, but just keep that in mind. The Forbidden Flame and the Forbidden Flesh were very, very end game items and not necessary. They just, obviously add a considerable amount of damage. And then for our Watcher's Eye, we have attack speed precision and then damage over time multiplier affected by malevolence. So this is a fairly expensive Watcher's Eye. But, I think early on I used damaging ailments faster when affected by malevolence, and then I moved to that with attack speed precision, and then eventually this was my final Watcher's Eye that I ended up using, which is super powerful and really, really nice. So that's it. That's about it for the tree, and as you can see, damage is really good. And this build is just a lot of fun. Survivability is insane. It's very, very tanky and just a lot of fun. So now let's kind of get into the gear here. And as I said, I prefaced earlier, last time, I did a build guide and mageblood was sitting there. Everyone kind of freaked out a little bit and was like, man, mageblood. But again, dyidian Dawn is best in slot for 95% of the game. It's not until the rest of your gear is really, really powerful that you're going to feel that mageblood is beneficial to you, right? So, and this is a very cheap item. You can get these for, right at league start. All uniques are expensive, but prices drop really fast. It's a fairly common unique to drop, so you'll see it pretty quickly. So right away though, we'll get into we'll do the gear and then also the gems that are in the gear. So for the bow here, and what I want to say right off the bat, the most important aspect of this build is to not have any flat fire damage on anything, right? So you don't want to have it on your bow, you don't want to have it on jewels, you don't want to have it on your quiver. You do not want any flat fire damage anywhere because it will ruin your elemental equilibrium, right? So what we want is we want to have, as you can see here, a little bit of flat lightning here, and then we have a little bit of flat cold here. And what that does is that allows us to proc our elemental equilibrium, right? So we're hitting with a little bit of flat cold and a little bit of flat lightning, which adds exposure to fire resistance, right, for us. So because it's all based on the hit. And then where we get our ignite power from is our explosive arrow. As you can see, the third line down in blue is explosions will have 1588 to 2382 added fire damage, which is a lot of fire damage. And so when that explodes, that does not affect elemental equilibrium. It only affects the damage itself, right? And because your actual hit of the arrow was only cold and lightning, and it's very, very low amounts. It doesn't have to be a lot. It will apply the fire damage. Then when the explosive arrows explode, that is where your ignite will come from, and it gets very, very powerful. So as you can see, 1588 to 2382 because we're a level 32. The base gem at level 21 is only 579 to 868. So as you can see, that damage goes up astronomically with gem levels. And as I said earlier, it's a level 32. You still get good damage past gem level 30, but there is some level of fall off. So if you can get it to 30, that's perfect. You'll be good to go. And as far as the bow itself, we just have attack speed, +1 to socketed gems, +2 to socketed bow, damage over time multiplier, and then we craft on fire damage over time multiplier. So as you can see, it's also missing an attribute or a suffix or a prefix, but there's nothing really on there. We could slam it and try to get like cold or lightning or whatever, but there's nothing really that, like, the chances of me hitting fire damage and completely bricking the bow is possible and not necessarily worth the upsides, right? So this is what we landed on, and this is what we've been using. The only thing that maybe you could upgrade this with, and we started crafting it a little bit, would be, and these are not it, right? But something like this, right? Like if you had +1 to socketed, +2 to socketed bow, and then you got +1 to socketed dex, and then you had the damage over time multiplier stuff. So that would be but again, I never ended up crafting one. I spent a decent amount of currency, and I never ended up getting one that was sufficient or usable. I got a lift for 30 divines. That's, I don't know why, I haven't played in a couple weeks, but it is what it is. But so that would be really the only step up that you could have from something like this, that you would see a drastic change in damage, right? And these are fairly easy to craft. If you guys are interested in seeing a crafting guide, these are for as much damage as you get out of this bow, they are extremely inexpensive to craft and very, very easy. It only costs, you could easily do this for under 10 divines for sure, maybe 4 or 5 depending on how lucky you get. So this is a very cheap bow. And then as far as skill gems, we have a level 4 in power. Obviously, you could get an awakened and take this to, a level 5. And then we have Ballista Totem. We have Awakened Burning Damage, Awakened Deadly Ailments. We have our Explosive Arrow, which is a 31. And I will say, too, as you can see, this has no quality on it. And the reason being is it increases skill effect duration, which you do not want with an Explosive Arrow. Because the way Explosive Arrow works is it either explodes based on the amount of time that the arrow has been in the enemy, or once it has the max amount, which is 20 arrows in it, which then it detonates, right? All right, so real quick, I'm going to edit this in because patch notes have dropped for 3.23, and I honestly think now I was just literally going over, and I left that in there about talking about how, skill effect duration and stuff like that, and the quality of the gem is important, because that is still important. You don't want to stack a lot of skill effect duration. But I think now that with the buffs to the new quality of gems, this build might be even stronger, right? And the reason being is in the patch notes here, we have explosive arrows. So quality now provides 0 to 2 maximum explosive arrows stuck in an enemy, right? So number one, it's gotten rid of the skill effect duration, which we did not want to begin with. But now we can have an extra 2 explosive arrows stuck in the enemy, so that's 22, right? So if we come in here and we take the, will it even increase? Oh, so it won't even let us increase, right? But even from 19 to 20, you go from 22 mil to 24 mil, right? So we're going to get another probably 2.5 to 4 million added DPS by this new scale gem. So if you are able to convert it in the divine font, this is going to be insane, and this is going to add a considerable amount of more damage. And I just wanted to get that in there now that I've been through the patch notes and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's just going to be insane. So again, I just wanted to interject with that now that I've been through all the patch notes, and I wanted to provide you guys with the best information possible. But yeah, definitely try to get your hands on this gem, and I think you'll notice a drastic damage increase, and it should feel really, really nice. So let's get back to it. And then lastly, we have Ignite Proliferation, which just, helps with, clear speed, stuff like that. But you also get the 25% more damage with Ignite, which is very, very powerful. So those are our skill gems there. Here's our bow. Again, fairly inexpensive to craft. As far as end game bows go, this is probably one of the cheapest bows that I've ever crafted that took me through everything, right? We'll go to helmet next. And this is just, we just bought a cheap base with fractured fire resistance on it, just again because, as we discussed earlier, max fire resistance adds resistances to our other resistances, but also gives us regen. So we stack a ton of fire resistance. We got spell suppression, increased mana reservation, efficiency of skills, crafted life, a little bit of regen. This helmet could be much better, but it is just fine. And then as far as our Eldritch implicits, we have enemies you've hit recently have 71% life regeneration rate, less life regeneration rate, and that just helps with, and oftentimes with damage over time builds, if something has a lot of life regeneration, it's kind of a pain in the ass to kill it. So this assists with that, and then obviously reduced cost of attacks. And that gets our cost is 9 mana and 13 life, so it's fairly cheap to cast this. And then we have, and again, now with 3.23, there will not be the divine font in the in the lab no longer gives us enchantments. It now messes with the gems and does all that kind of stuff. So we this is maybe find a little bit of attack speed or something somewhere else. But in our helmet, we have Mana Forged Arrows, Overcharge, GMP, and Storm Rain. So in some of the other versions, people like to use Lightning Spire Trap and stuff like that to apply shock, but I use Storm Rain on Mana Forged, which feels really good. It doesn't require you to cast an additional ability. It just, as you throw down your totems, this gets thrown out, helps overcharge and shock, and you do more damage to shocked enemies, so all that kind of stuff. So this just is a big damage buff, and you are not required to use a trap or anything like that to get shock on the enemy. Okay, and then as far as our body armor, again, spell suppression, we just found one that had fractured spell suppress, +2 to max fire res, and determination aura effect for our eldritch. And then, I needed a little bit of intelligence, and then, we've got a ton of armor and life and all that kind of stuff. And then we just craft on fire resistance, because half of that fire resistance applies to the rest of our resistances. And then this is where we have our auras. So we have Enlighten level 4, Malevolence, Clarity, Determination, Enduring Cry, and then Precision. Precision is leveled up as much as I needed it to be. And then, that is what it is. So that's, it's a nice body armor, pretty standard, nothing crazy. You could replace this with something else, a unique chest if you prefer, whatever the case may be. But this is where our auras live. As far as gloves go, we just have Eldritch Implicit, Suppress, and Attack Speed. And then we have more Spell Suppress. The cold damage, this is where we're getting our flat cold to proc Elemental Equilibrium. Attack Speed, Regen, Life, pretty standard, nothing crazy. These gloves are not anything super special. You can craft these or find these fairly cheaply on the market. Our boots, again, Fractured Chaos res. We have +1 to max fire res and increased life regeneration rate. Attributes, this is where I have a lot of my attributes, my dex and intelligence, life, movement speed, all that kind of stuff. So again, nothing crazy on these boots, but these are fairly nice with all the attributes and the chaos resistances, and we just crafted these with essences, dex or int, wait for one to hit, and then you can do your prefixes as you see fit. As far as our quiver goes, this is a fairly nice quiver. Elemental damage with attack skills, damage with bow skills, projectile speed. This is where we have our flat lightning damage, and then fire damage over time multiplier and damage over time multiplier. I was using this one up until I got this one here, right? And this one was just, again, nothing crazy, but damage over time multiplier with attack skills, really, really nice. Life, pretty standard. But this is the one, this is my end game quiver. As far as rings go, chaos resistance, life, accuracy, attributes. Again, this is not a crazy ring. And then non-channeling skills, mana cost. The other one is fairly similar. This one just has intelligence on it, and curse with flammability on hit. So this is where we get our flammability. Some people like to use it on a brand or stuff like that. I found it was easier and effective just on a ring. So this ring will be a little bit more expensive than this one, but still, I started with a really kind of poor flammability on hit ring, and then little by little, as I started getting more money and building my character up, we built up to this one with a little bit of attributes and flammability, and of course non-channeling skills. And then as far as, I guess I didn't go over these. So we have another Mana Forged in our gloves, and this is Mana Forged in Snaring Arrow, GMP, and Frenzy. So this is where we're generating our Frenzy charges and just kind of slowing some things down a little bit. This is nice for just quality of life stuff. And you're just constantly spraying these things out with Mana Forge, so there's always stuff going on, and you're getting your frenzy charges, slowing things down, shocking things, etc., etc. So that feels real good. As far as boots go, we have our Flame Surge, Arcanist Brand, and Culling Strike. So this is just, Flame Surge adds a lot of single target DPS. So, some people I think like to run the Flame Surge and all this in their 6-link, and then they add flammability and, curse on hit. And there's a lot of different ways, but I personally found this was the best way to do it. And then Culling Strike obviously feels really good. And then Flame Dash is just sitting here on its own. And then as far as amulet goes, this is actually a really, really nice amulet. And this cost me, I think, 20 divine or so. And I crafted one that was very similar to this. It just didn't have all skill gems. It was essentially the same the same amulet, but just minus all skill gems, and that's why I was like, I spent a lot of time and money kind of trying to craft this, and I found this one, and I was like, I'm just gonna go ahead and buy this. We anoint charisma, and that just gives us more, mana reservation efficiency of skills. Attributes, we needed the strength and the dex, so we slapped those on there, and this is the amulet. So this is a very nice amulet. This is probably one of the more expensive items that I have. I would say, honestly, this probably is the most expensive item, but you can build up to this with an amulet with all fire skill and damage over time multiplier for a couple divine, a couple weeks into the league, or craft one fairly cheaply with harvest or something like that, buy the base, and then just keep hitting it with, add fire until you hit your all fire skill gems and get something useful. That's what I did for my first one. And that's that. And again, we're going to come back to this. Obviously, mageblood is on the belt, and these are our flasks. So if you are going to, go to mageblood, this is what we're looking for. Quicksilver with elemental resistances, sulfur with attack speed, granite with movement speed, ruby with chance to freeze, shock, ignite, and that just helps us get to 100% chance to ignite. But again, you will use this for most of the game, and it will get you through everything you need. Easily. Like I said, this is best in slot until literally your build is looking like this, right? And again, we kind of went over these real quick. We got our freeze and chill, we got our immunity to poison, etc. As far as Pantheon goes, obviously you don't need that. When we switched over, we went to Soul of the Brine King, so you'd have 100% chance to avoid being frozen. And then we go ahead and use Soul of Rislatha, and the enemies you hit recently have 50% reduced life regeneration rate. So this, combined with this, basically gives the enemy 120% reduced life regeneration rate. So that's very nice for damage over time build. So just even if you're not going to run ignite, keep that in mind. That is very, very helpful if you're running a bleed or a poison, or less so with poison just because it's so fucking powerful. But with ignite and bleed and things like that, those are very, very nice and really, really help with damage. So that's that. And as again, we got to go in here, we've got, good resistances, 82 max res on all. We're capped on chaos, 280. So that's giving us about 200 flat life regen per second. Ignite avoidance is low, but we have 100% chill and freeze avoidance. And it feels really good. So stunning isn't a huge issue just because you're able to just put your totems down and kind of run off. So, nothing crazy there, but yeah, that's about it, guys. I think I went over everything. So we did gear, we did skill gems, we did the tree, excuse me, a little gassy here. We went over all of this. And as you can see, this is all in here. Configuration, there's nothing crazy here. We've just got a couple frenzy charges, stuff like that. We have onslaught, blah blah blah. I think that's actually 5. We're 24. And some of these things, it doesn't really matter. And as you can see, we're on Guardian Pinnacle boss, so that's a lot of damage for bossing, right? So that's about it, guys. If you have any questions, let me know. If you guys want to see the guide for how to craft that bow, just let me know down in the comments below. Super helpful. Like and subscribe, all that kind of stuff. Lets me know if you guys are liking these videos and these guides and if they're helpful or not. But that's about it, guys. So if you guys have any questions, please let me know. I hope this is helpful, and I'm super stoked for the new league. Let me know what you guys think, if you're excited, think it looks good, etc., etc. And we'll see you on the next one. Peace.